In the previous section, I showed you my method for pasteurizing straw. This section picks up right where that one left off, and I'm going to show you two different projects that I like to do. Feel free to adapt them in any way that suits your particular environment. The first method I'm going to show you is what I call the laundry basket technique, and we'll simply be laying some straw and colonized rye grains layer after layer until we fill the basket up. Once the basket's filled, we will be putting a weight on top to hold it slightly compressed while it colonizes, and then I'll move it outdoors for fruiting. I've found that these work much better outdoors than in. You just need to find a nice shady place and keep it humid and water it every day if necessary. The second method I'll show you is a straw log technique where I will be stuffing straw very tightly into a plastic sleeve and then laying it on its side to colonize. These can also be used vertically, but I found if you put the straw logs vertically, the water tends to run from gravity down to the bottom and the top of it dries out. So I like to use them in the horizontal method. But at any rate, let's get started. As usual, I'll be using a tire to break up the grain spine. Then I'll put down a layer of straw in the basket and then a layer of grain spine on that and then another layer of straw, and I'll alternate until the basket is full. It's going to use 7 quarts of grain spine to inoculate a laundry basket this size. It's a good idea to give at least 1 or 2 jars from each batch of your grain spine a good sniff before you use it. Each mushroom species has a distinct fragrance signature, and you'll learn over time to recognize right away if you have any contamination present. Another thing to notice, you'll see as I dump the grain spine onto the straw, I'm carefully avoiding the edges of the basket. I want to keep my grain spine to the middle of the basket and up to about, say, 2 inches, about 4 centimeters or so from the edge. And the reason for that, I have found that most straw projects contaminate when the grain spine gets near the edge. If it dries out, the mycelium weakens. Then when it gets re-moisturized, any contaminants that may be on it, the molds will grow faster than the mushroom mycelium can recover, and they will then take over the grains and move into your straw, ruining the project. So try to keep your grains away from the very edges. You can see I try to loosen up the straw that might be packed and then get it laid down as evenly as possible between the layers of your grain spawn. This helps it to colonize more evenly and faster and ensures that the entire basket is all colonized at the same time. I should probably point out it takes a bit of practice to get an eyeball measurement for how much straw you need to chop up and pasteurize for a given project. So don't feel bad your first few times if you're trying to fill a laundry basket and you get 2/3 or 3/4 full and run out, or you get it full and you have half the tote left over, because you do it by the eyeball method. But after a few times and a few projects, you'll amaze yourself with how accurately you'll be able to just look at a pile of straw and know how much you need to chop up for a given project. You're going to need to hold your straw compressed a little bit. You don't need a whole lot of weight on it, but you do need to keep a little bit of pressure to keep your straw from fluffing up. If it fluffs up, it makes it a lot harder for the mycelium to colonize, because the gaps between the pieces of straw are much greater and your mycelium has to go airborne to get across them. So put a little bit of weight, get imaginative, use whatever you have around the house. You can see here I've got a lid from a tote and a couple of rocks. The next thing you want to do is give the straw that is sticking out around the edges a bit of a haircut. And don't get too carried away, but the pieces that are sticking out a lot, go ahead and trim those off, because they're just going to wick moisture away. And as the final step, you need to control the amount of moisture that is going to be lost during colonization. So you can either wrap it in plastic. If you do that, make sure you have holes poked in the plastic, because you do need some gas exchange. I have one of these Rubbermaid totes with holes cut in it, and I simply drop the laundry basket down in that and put the lid on. Colonization is going to take about 2 to 3 weeks, and once it's fully colonized, the surfaces are still going to have uncolonized straw, because the dry straw will not colonize. But you'll notice underneath the cover you have there, it will fully colonize. And if you look down about a 1/2 inch deep into the straw, it will be fully colonized. And at that point, take it out of the tote and find a shady place in your yard. If you have a mini greenhouse, you can fruit it in that. But oyster mushrooms require a lot of light and a lot of air exchange. And so I found that it's best to put them outside. If you're growing Psilocybe cubensis, then they work great in a mini greenhouse. But oyster mushrooms want more light than that and more air exchange, so they'll do a lot better under a tree or on your back porch under an awning. Just be sure to keep them well watered, keep it moist, and keep the air exchange high, and it'll work out really well for you. This next series of pictures was taken just before some of the early birds were harvested. All in all, we ended up getting about 10 pounds of mushrooms from this laundry basket on the very first flush. It flushed several times after that. So in my area, good healthy oysters like these bring about $9 a pound at the grocery stores. So you're looking at $90 on about 50 cents worth of straw on the first flush alone. So if you wanted to play your cards right and grow these, you can certainly make some money on them. Otherwise, you can feed your family very well. Now we're going to move right from the laundry basket into the straw log tech, and As this text starts, that good-looking guy behind me is showing his wife how he breaks up the spawn jars on a tire before spawning them. And Vivian here is going to help me hold the bag open and stuff as we make this straw log. So let's watch, and what you're going to see is going to be happening very fast because it's not much different from the laundry basket technique. So we're going to stuff this straw log, and once the straw log is full, we'll roll it on the floor, get it flattened out real good into shape, and then I'll take an arrowhead and poke some holes in it for ventilation for gas exchange. So let's watch. I'm going to keep this clip running and fast forward so I don't bore you to tears with it. Now, as you see, the log is full. I'm going to go ahead and wrap tie wire around it, roll it on the floor to shape it, and then I'm going to wipe it down with alcohol before I poke the holes, and that's just to prevent my arrowhead from pushing any contaminants that might be on the surface of the plastic down into the log. The reason I put the straw log on this tote lid is because over about the first 3 or 4 days, excess moisture will be draining from the straw and leaking out, so you need it to be on something to keep from making a mess. Now, with that in mind, you see I'm poking holes. You want to make sure you've got at least one row of holes on the very bottom to let this excess moisture get out, and then once or twice you'll need to tilt the lid and drain it so the log doesn't sit in that excess water. As you can see, 24 hours later, the mycelium is already recovering on the grain kernels themselves, and by day 3, it's growing rapidly. Now, this is oyster mycelium. It's very fast growing, but depending on the species, full colonization will take anywhere from, say, about 8 to 14 days. And at full colonization, very carefully take some scissors and slit down the length of the bag and unwrap it. I like to unwrap it, expose it to air, and put it into fruiting conditions. A mini greenhouse works really nice, but keep the plastic where you can sort of fold it back into place as a humidity tent, and then several times a day open it up and fan it out, and then close the plastic again. This will maintain 100% humidity right up against your straw log, and it'll really help to stimulate pinning. This final set of pictures was taken just before harvest, and they're an excellent demonstration of the difference between indoor and outdoor growing. Not only is this the same species you saw in the laundry basket, it's genetically identical. It's from the exact same culture, the exact clone. However, the ones outdoors were a completely different shape. They were much thicker and meatier and had a lot more weight to them. The difference is the natural sunlight the ones outdoors received is much brighter than the fluorescent lights I use indoors. These were grown in a mini greenhouse in my bedroom at normal room temperature, which is considerably warmer than it was outdoors when the laundry basket was fruiting. Cooler weather gives you a higher quality fruit. It grows much slower and thicker, so the outdoor laundry basket, even though it was genetically identical to this, had a much different presentation. Finally, I'd like to close with this picture sent to me by a gentleman in the Netherlands. This is Psilocybe cubensis, the penis envy strain named for obvious reasons, and he found that it is also an excellent candidate for growing on straw logs. Good luck to you.